So on the trial that begins on Monday with jury selection and the rest, back to my friend Andy McCarthy, the former U.S. attorney, Fox News contributor. Andy, we're looking at 34 felonies in this Hush trial, and most of them focusing on upgrading from misdemeanor charges to felony charges. But as the Wall Street Journal points out, because the statute of limitations had run out on even some of the misdemeanor charges, they upgraded them, to the felony level. I'm wondering, can you do that?
Well, we're going to find out. He shouldn't be able to do that. I think this was at most a misdemeanor. And the reason it's so important, Neil, is as a misdemeanor, all of the counts would be gone. Because what happened here is what's at issue is how a loan, essentially from Michael Cohen, which was paid for the non-disclosure agreement to Stormy Daniels, that's an October 2016 loan. It's paid back in installments from February of 2017 until December of 2017. If it's a misdemeanor, the statute of limitations is 2 years, and the last payment is December of 2017. So this should have run in 2019. If you were a little bit creative, maybe 2020, but this case would be long lapsed. The only way he can get it in under the wire is to try to exacerbate it into a felony where he would get the advantage of a 5-year statute of limitations, which becomes 6 in New York because in COVID they tacked another year on.
Which is probably why federal prosecutors dropped any interest in pursuing this, and why Alvin Bragg's predecessor essentially did the same. But being that as it may, one of the many brilliant things you said, and I think in our last interview, Andy, is how difficult it is to find a sympathetic pool of jurors in this bluest of blue cities of New York. But you did remind me all it takes is one. And to that point, the Wall Street Journal had an interesting sort of a step back on this, saying that the Stormy Daniels affair was sordid business, but the DA's argument is a legal stretch in ways that might bother a skeptical juror or an appeals court. Essentially saying, as you just did, that one juror, it takes one juror to say, wait a minute, how likely is that?
I think it's not as unlikely as people think because, having tried cases in that borough, I mean, we did it in federal court where the jury selection's slightly different. But I like jurors in Manhattan. I thought that they were very fair-minded for the most part. What I'd be concerned about from President Trump's standpoint is the main thing I would want to get in front of the jury as a defense lawyer is a legal argument rather than a factual argument that the judge may not let them make, which is that no one other than Donald Trump would have been prosecuted on this offense. It's inconceivable. I mean, basically, they made this case for Trump. Alvin Bragg is one of these classic progressive prosecutors who doesn't really prosecute real crime. His practices are basically not to put the pedal to the metal when it comes to charging. And here you have a case where he's going up against a political enemy. He brings a charge that he would never bring against anyone else. And he takes a misdemeanor and turns it into 34 felonies when he's the guy who takes felonies and turns them into misdemeanors.
Be that as it may, this is what we've got, these 34 felonies that could produce a conviction or 2 or 3. Then what?
Well, I guess the first thing is, in this, it's hard to believe anyone would be sent to prison for something like this in New York, where, again, a lot more serious crime than this often does not result in incarceration. But what would happen, Neil, is the trial will take about 6 weeks, let's say. So that gets us into maybe early June. Usually there's about 3 months between the time a trial ends and the time sentence is imposed. We could see an extension of that here. And then he could get a sentence imposed. And we really don't know what had happened. I mean, if he gets a prison sentence imposed and the court remands him and the Court of Appeals won't allow him to stay on bail pending appeal, you could have litigation over whether he has to surrender or not. But we're a long way from that.
Do you think he should testify, as the president said he would, he wanted to? Now, of course, he said this before and didn't. If you were his lawyer, what would you tell him?
I think it kind of depends on how the trial plays out. One of the claims he's made, which I think, frankly, is implausible, and I say this as someone who thinks this is a nonsense case, is that the fling with Stormy Daniels didn't happen. I actually think, to your point about how this is a booking case rather than a Stormy case, Stormy Daniels isn't really even an essential witness here. But if she testifies that this affair happened and the jury, it's a believable story and the jury believes her, then if he takes the stand, he's kind of got to deny it, since that's been his story all along. And if that's not a believable story, he might be better off not taking the stand.
Got it. Well, watch what happens, Andy. Monday's the day it all kicks off.
It
Could
sure is.
last up to 6 weeks. Andy McCarthy on all of that.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.